season of Christmas paper craft, and I'm sure you're looking for ideas that are fun and easy and a breeze to make. There are a lot of Christmas crafts here on YouTube, but I found that many of them require a lot of supplies and a whole lot of measuring. They're like those delicious recipes that you see with 100 ingredients that take 4 hours to make. These projects are the complete opposite of that. They use only simple supplies that I know you already have, and they come together fast. I've made them all in just 12 days as part of a stash busting challenge. I created as many projects as possible to use up my ugly Christmas paper stash, and you can make them too. It's time to pull out your supplies and come create with me. This is my stash of Christmas craft supplies, and this is the box they're supposed to fit into. I was about to start using up my stash when I realized just how many ugly Christmas pattern papers I have. I know ugly Christmas sweaters are a thing, but are ugly Christmas papers a thing too? That's when I decided it was time for a stash busting challenge. I have 12 days to use these forgotten supplies to make as many Christmas projects as possible. Here are the rules. Rule number 1. Each project must include at least one ugly Christmas pattern paper. Rule number 2. No new items allowed. I can only use what's currently in my stash. Rule number 3. Projects need to be completed in an hour or less and be easy to make so you can make them for your family and friends. Today's project is perfect if you're short on time. What's even better is that it will use up a bunch of paper scraps and embellishments. Of course, we also need to add in as many ugly pattern papers as possible. It's time to get started. Today I'll be creating with Crepe Paper's Hey Santa collection, and I've pulled out a bunch of my paper scraps. We are going to get die cutting in a moment here. Because it's day one, I wanted to get some quick wins and I wanted to create some projects that come together really quickly. I'm going to start by batch cutting a bunch of tags out. I've got 2 sizes that I'm working with here, and then I also have a couple of bow dies. They create 3D bows and they're really good for using up with paper scraps. So I'm going to cut out a bunch of those as well. I'll do my best to link all of the supplies in the description box below, but I do encourage you to use what you have. I'm working here with a collection that I've already used quite a lot. You'll want to choose a line that you've used and made several projects with before, and one that has paper scraps left over that aren't super small. The large tag that I'm working with here is a little over 6 inches long. Here's a look at the first ugly pattern paper I'll be using, and I know this one isn't actually that ugly. It's more that it is hard to use for me because it's got snowflakes on it. It does not snow here at all where I live in Australia, so snowflake icons are quite tricky for me. The main thing I was looking here for these pattern papers were ones that would fit my tag size. Oh yes, this one. This one is actually one of my least favorite papers. I better make sure to include some of that. Now, I also wanted to mention that I'll be using words like ugly, bold, hard to use and forgotten for these kind of pattern papers. I'm talking about the papers that are in my stash that I have been neglecting or avoiding for some reason. My big goal at the end of this series is to be left with a stash that I really, really love, that I find easy to use. It would be so much more fun if you joined me on the challenge. Be sure to check the description box below for a link to the Facebook group. So I have cut out a bunch of tags. It's now time to cut out the bows, and I am batching all of the steps in this. I'm going to create maybe 9 tags here, and it is so much faster to do each step as a batch rather than completing an entire tag all in one go. I'm all about them bows, so it's time to create a bit of an assembly line and get these all made up. The two different dies come in two different style of bow. The first one has 2 separate pieces and the second has 3 separate pieces. They are very easy to put together, and this is actually a really fun job to do while you're watching a Christmas movie. Do you watch movies while you create? I tend not to because I get a little bit distracted. I find that I can't do both of those things at once, but I know a lot of creatives who do. So let me know what you like to watch in the comments below. And here they all are. Aren't they cute? And here are my tags, so everything is now prepped. This is where the fun begins because now I can pull out all of my bits and pieces of ephemera and my smaller paper scraps to create some beautiful layers on the tags. I'm going to start with my very least favorite pattern paper, and there was a reason that I made sure to cut a tag from this one. If you're doing this with your stash, you will want to make sure to put your ugliest papers down first. Use the ugliest ones to cut your tags with. As you create the card, you're going to be placing all of these other pretty supplies on top, so you actually don't end up seeing a lot of what is on the tag base. I'm going to use my cluster cake method to create these, and if you're not sure what that is, essentially I'm imagining the tag as if it were a beautiful big wedding cake. The bottom of the tag is the bottom layer of the cake and therefore is the largest, and then I'll work through medium supplies and smaller supplies, and those will be on top. I have made a full step-by-step tutorial for this process. I'll be sure to leave a link to that video in the description box below. Each of the tags is going to get its own bow, and you'll see here that they all sort of fit in a similar format. I really don't see the point in reinventing the wheel here. I am not trying to come up with a brand new design for every single tag. All I'm doing is digging through my stash, looking for pieces that would fit within the layers and then layering them up on top of each other. I also did find a small scrap of vintage sewing paper, so I am going to use that in my layers to create some texture, and you will see towards the end of the video that I do pop these into my sewing machine. So it might seem like I have finished that one card. I have not. I will get back to that here in a moment. I am going to get pretty much all of them up to that same level, so they're going to be about 80% done. I actually find it really lovely to create like this, to create in batches and then have that bit of breathing space in between each project to sort of come back and have a look at things with fresh eyes. I want to use up a stack of these embellishments, so I am being very generous in my layering, but I do want to be careful not to overdo it. I'm also being mindful about the spread of colors and the icons that I'm using across the tags. I don't want to get to tag number 9 and be left with a bunch of like red things or a bunch of elements that are giant. I do want to try and really mix and match my icons here. I am going for a very eclectic look here, which is why I also added in that vintage paper. It's the kind that you get in like the sewing patterns. You know, I don't even think they make them like that anymore, but you can get them in vintage stores. So it's like a packet of sewing patterns, and the paper it's almost like tissue paper. So here is tag number 2, very similar design, but it looks very, very different. Really just a bunch of layered paper scraps and then anchoring it towards one side of the tag. Of course, I need to add a bow to the top, and I am securing everything with a liquid adhesive. These are going to be placed on gifts, and I don't want to lose any of the bits and pieces if I'm traveling with them. I also have this book of sentiment stickers, and they are going to be perfect for this project. I actually don't buy these anymore, especially as a scrapbook supply. They are perfectly fine for cards and projects like this, but on my scrapbook pages, I have turned into a little bit of a sticker snob. Are you the same? Oh, I prefer to work with stickers in my scrapbook layouts that are a bit thicker, that have a little bit more substance to them. The ones too that work really well if you mount them up on 3D foam. Let me know in the comments below. Surely I'm not alone. Surely I'm not the only one who's a little bit obsessed with the quality of their paper craft supplies. Oh yes, I almost forgot to mention, if you're one of the lovely creatives who's been following along with my clustering series and you're looking for something to practice your clusters on, this is the project for you. You could treat each one of these tags as an embellishment cluster. It would be a great way to practice building embellishment clusters, and you're spreading a little Christmas cheer. So this is tag number 3, and I am going to weight it here on the right hand side, and I do like to have a few little overlapping elements. You will have seen on the previous tags that I do extend the pieces of paper and the banners and things over the edge of the tag. There's a reason for that. It's going to sound strange, but I don't want the tag to end up looking too rectangular. Now, I know it is a rectangle tag, so of course it will look rectangular, but I want the outside line of the tag to be interesting. And the way to achieve that is to extend little bits and pieces of the ephemera out over the edge. The funny thing is, it actually doesn't even need to be too far over the edge. I'm talking 1/4 of an inch maximum. All you want to do is break the line of the rectangle of the tag. So if you think your tags look too rectangular, too solid on the left and right hand sides, scooch your embellishments out over the edge ever so slightly. I promise they will look so much better. I do have a couple of smaller tags that I've made. I think there was 2 in this smaller size. Same rule applies, except obviously you've got a lot less space to work with. So you do need to keep things a little bit simpler. So it was about at this point that I realized that I didn't have a lot of texture on the tags. I had used up all of that really pretty sewing paper, but I did have this paper doily, so I'm going to add that in, and that did sort of start a thought process in my mind to add some things that are a little bit more textured. I am going to have a look in my stash in a moment here for some maybe ribbon or fabric that I can also add into the tags. I would say that the style of this collection is a little bit whimsical and then sort of like vintage eclectic. It does give me Maggie Holmes vibes actually, but it is just a regular crate paper collection. If you're playing along at home, I recommend you choose a collection that is quite similar. To make this as easy as possible for you, you'll want a collection where all of the different pattern papers work with each other really easily. You don't want to have to think too hard about things coordinating with each other. Remember, this is day 1 of a 12-day challenge. Don't worry, there'll be plenty of time for perfectly coordinated supplies. Can you see how the paper doily adds a little bit of texture? I really love the feeling of that. I need to include more of those in my projects. I have actually forgotten just how nice they are. I didn't want to waste any of it, so I am going to add this small piece into the side here. Now you might be wondering what I'm going to do to the backs of each of the tags. These are all single-sided papers, so the backs of them are actually quite plain and white. It would be better to work with double-sided papers, but if you don't have those, here's what you need to do. Simply die cut out an extra tag and add it to the back. I've then added my stitching to secure everything together. I'll use that space to write who the parcel is to and from and my Christmas message. These super cute gift tags sure do use up a lot of embellishments, but I haven't used up nearly enough ugly pattern paper just yet. It is day 2 of creating as many Christmas projects as possible using my forgotten Christmas stash. I know ugly Christmas sweaters are a thing, but are ugly Christmas papers a thing too? Welcome to my 12 Days of Christmas Stash Busting Challenge. Here are the rules. Rule number 1, each project needs to include at least one ugly Christmas pattern paper. Rule number 2, no new items allowed. I can only use the supplies that are currently in my stash. Rule number 3, projects need to be completed in an hour or less, and they need to be easy and fun to make so that you too can play along and create them for your friends and family. Yesterday I created a bunch of gift tags, and for today's project I'll be making an accordion fold Christmas card that looks complicated but isn't. This one is perfect as a specialty Christmas card to make for friends and family you really want to impress. I'll be creating with Crepe Paper's Busy Sidewalks for these projects. There are quite a few papers in here that I really want to get used up. And here's a look at the 4-fold card template. I have mocked this up, I have all the measurements, and we're going to go through it step by step. So starting with a full sheet of 12 by 12 cardstock, we're going to cut a piece that is 6.5 inches wide by 5 inches long. This will form the back side of the card. Next up, we need to create this middle section. This is the accordion fold part. This section is 11 inches long and 5.5 inches wide. This one we will need to score to create that accordion fold. Working along the longest edge, you want to score at 4 inches and 8 inches. Now, I don't have a large scoreboard, so I'm going to score at 4 inches and then fold that over and then go in another 4 inches. I'm also using my bone folder just to make sure those folds are nice and crisp. Next, we'll work on the section that will form the front of the card. This piece is 4.5 inches by 5.5 inches and will be scored at the 3-inch mark. I'll make sure that that fold is nice and crisp too, and now we can start to build the card. So the largest piece will be your base, this one right here. The longer piece is going to be the accordion fold center part. So it needs to be folded in a Z fold like so, and then you're going to attach some double-sided tape on that back section there. That's how we'll attach it to our base. Notice that the section that is attached to the back is actually the smallest section. That's how you know you've got the right one. I've used double-sided tape to do this and centered it top to bottom on the card. Be sure to line up the edge of the accordion piece with the left-hand edge of your card. That is the hardest part of construction now done. We're going to repeat that step with the front piece. Be sure to add your double-sided tape to the smallest section. Place it on top of the accordion fold piece and center top to bottom, just like so. Both of these pieces that you've added line up on the left-hand edge of the card. It's now time to decorate and time to find some ugly pattern paper. Now, of course, I have a plan. We're not just going to use ugly pattern paper because I do want this card to end up pretty. This is the one I'm going to find the most trouble with using, so I'm going to team it with a couple of prints that I really love. I'm going to use my broccoli example, and if you're not sure what that is, I'll be sure to leave a link to that video in the description box below. Essentially, the ugly pattern paper is our broccoli, and everybody knows that broccoli tastes better when it is paired with something far more delicious. For this project, you'll want to work with 3 different pattern papers. One of them should be your ugly pattern paper, and then pair that with 2 papers that you much prefer to use. A really good combination would be a floral, a check, and a spot. And that's what I'm going to be working with for this first card. If you work with those patterns, it will also be easier for you to follow along here. Are you joining me in the challenge? I do hope so. I'll leave a link in the description box below for the Facebook group. That's where you can share the projects that you're making. You can tell me about them too in the comments below. So while I've been chatting about all of that, I am adding paper layers onto my card base. I hope you're ready for a little controversy because I actually do not measure. For this part of my creating process, I measure nothing. All of this is done by eye. So I place the paper that I want to use over the area that I'm going to cover. I then mark it with my pencil and trim it on the pencil line. I know it sounds a little bit weird, but I've actually found this to be more accurate. I find that if I measure with a ruler and then cut the paper to the size of the ruler, I make mistakes and it ends up being wrong. So for me, it is so much faster just to place that pattern paper over the area, mark it with a pencil and trim at that point. I highly recommend that you give this technique a go. It might surprise you. Now, I do want to make these cards extra special, so I have taken the card away and added stitching around all of the edges. It's a really beautiful detail to add. It's now time to add some embellishments and also the closure for the card. When the card is complete, it's very unlikely that it's going to sit perfectly flat. So I did want to add in a ribbon closure that I could tie to secure it all together. You've got loads of options for ribbons here. I did start out with some bias binding, but ended up switching to this really nice natural twine. You will want to lock this ribbon in place before you start adding your embellishments to this front section. If you're using a super flat ribbon, you could even add it in underneath your paper layer. And you can see now how this is going to secure the card. Now, I highly recommend that you decorate the card from front to back. As you can see here, the embellishments that you add to the second and third layers, you can see them from the front. So as you add pieces, you want to keep opening and closing that front section so that you can see what the card will look like once it's complete. There's also a little bit of balancing to be done in terms of embellishments because you won't want the card to end up too thick, but I do like that layered look. If you have a bunch of Christmas stickers in your stash, pull them out. They are going to be great in these. So too are acetate pieces and tags, just like I've used here. Here's a look at the first completed card. I do have a second one to share with you. I purposefully left space for a Christmas message, and I will be tucking inside of here a gift card. So this card was created with very traditional Christmas colours. I want to show you one that's a little more modern. This is a collection by Coco Vanilla Studio and it is filled with pastels. I've started with a couple of their pocket page cards. I actually thought, you know what, this could be a really great way to use up a couple of those. They're the perfect size too because they do actually fit in behind that front section. You can see the right-hand side poking out there just a little, but I actually like that. It kind of adds to the layers of the card. I've just made really sure that that piece is centered so that it looks like it is meant to be there. Now for the front section of the card, I did want to find a pretty large embellishment. This is the perfect time to use up those bigger supplies. You also have the flexibility to choose something a little bit thicker for the front cover because you don't need to worry about the card folding. I do want a little more of this back page to show through to the front. So I'm just going to add in a little paper banner and you can see here how I'm going to position it. So I'm always checking that front section against the back section for positioning. I have so many pieces of ephemera and embellishments in this collection. I felt like I could go a little bit extra and add in lots of layers here. I also wanted to start with a simpler version in that first card and then show you how you can take it to the next level and add in extra details in this second one. Did you notice the satin seam binding I'm using as the closure? It's a much better fit for the beautiful, soft, creamy pastels that are in this card. I'm working on the back section here last, just making sure that anything that I position here is tucked behind those front layers. While I do that, I do have a question for you. What are the papers that you find the hardest to use up? Is it the ones that have bold patterns or really large prints? Or is it more of a colour thing? Do you struggle using certain colours? Let me know in the comments below so that I can make sure to include those kind of ugly pattern papers in the series. Here's a look at the completed card. I will flip through all of the pages so you can see all the embellishing that I've done here. This one certainly is more detailed than the first one, but I have still left space for my Christmas message. I really enjoyed putting these together and I hope you do too. So far in the challenge, I've used up a lot of paper scraps and embellishments. Tomorrow, I'm going to focus on full sheets of 12 by 12 pattern paper. I'll be creating a scrapbook layout that comes together in a flash with the help of 2 secret ingredients. I'm creating as many projects as possible to use up my forgotten Christmas stash. It is day 3 and I've already made a bunch of gift tags and interactive Christmas cards. I know ugly Christmas sweaters are a thing, but are ugly Christmas papers a thing too? Welcome to my 12 Days of Christmas Stash Busting Challenge. Here are the rules. Rule number 1, every project needs to include at least 1 ugly Christmas pattern paper. Rule number 2, no new items allowed. I can only use what's in my stash. Rule number 3, projects need to be completed in an hour or less and be fun and easy to make, so you too can play along and create them for your friends and family. Today, I'll be creating a simple scrapbook layout that comes together super fast with the help of 2 secret ingredients. I'll even share with you ideal substitutes in case you don't have these things. Of course, we also need to find ourselves an ugly Christmas pattern paper, so let's get started on that. Today, I'll be creating with Cocoa Vanilla Studios' Joyful Collection, and the focus will be on these pocket cards. I'll also be working with a cut file from Cut to You, and be sure to link that in the description box below. I have gone ahead off camera and created a frame for the background of my layout, and I've also backed the cut file. It was super hard to find an ugly Christmas paper in this collection, so I've gone with the ones that I thought were the boldest and the hardest to use. I found a bright red pattern paper and I am going to use that in my title, and I'm going to team it very traditionally with a deep green. The other elements that I really wanted to use were these pocket cards, because I actually find using them on pages a little bit tricky. I have tucked them into my layers in the past, but generally that only uses up 1 or 2. Today's focus is to get quite a few of these onto the layout, so I'm actually going to start the layout design with them. They are going to be the first secret ingredient to pull the page together fast. This layout design is super simple and I've done that on purpose. I really want you to be able to recreate this page, and I do hope that you are playing along with the 12 Days of Christmas and stash busting your Christmas supplies. I do have a Facebook group where you can share your projects and ask questions. I'll be sure to link that below. Now, I did promise you substitutes, so if you don't have any pocket cards in your stash, you could use just regular pattern paper, or you could use those cut apart sheets. You know, the ones that have a bunch of icons on them. Generally speaking, they do have 2 by 3 inch squares. Sometimes they have tags and bits and pieces on them. Try and find one of those. Find 4 that go together and then center them onto the background of your layout. Your photo, title, and embellishments will all go on top. So the title for this page is my cut file, and it is actually the second key ingredient to creating pages quickly. I'm a huge fan of any kind of pre-made title. If you don't have a cut file, you can use separate alphabet stickers, but what would be even better is to try and find a collection with pre-made titles in it. A large die-cut title would work, and I have seen in many of the Pink Fresh Studio collections those puffy words. They would be great as titles. This collection collection has them too, but I did feel they were a little bit small to add in here as a title. So what I've done is layered it on top of the cut file title. I've done this a few times now and I really love the look. I especially love it when I can find the same word. So in my cut file it says Christmas and then the puffy sticker word is Christmas. See how they're the same? It's done on purpose. I am working with a 4x4 inch photo. I feel like that size works really well with this layout design, and I have positioned it on purpose slightly to the right. I didn't want to cover up that very cute candy cane icon. That is actually the print on the pocket card. I'm also going to use the print on the pocket card down the bottom there, the one with a cute little squirrel on it. It's going to be the foundation of an embellishment cluster. So when you're working with the pocket cards in your scrapbook layouts, you have two options. You can pop them into your paper layers and embellishment clusters in a way that covers up the icons on them. Essentially, you'll only see the border, the frame of the card. That's the best way to use them when you don't love what's printed on them. If you were switching them out for ugly pattern papers, that's the best way to use them as well, because you're going to cover up most of what that print is. The other way that you can use them on your scrapbook layouts is as embellishment pieces or as ephemera. And in those cases, you would want to ensure that you can see what's printed on them. That may mean fussy cutting elements out of them, or designing your page in the way that I have here so that you can see those elements. Now, as we've been chatting all about that, I have been building out my embellishment clusters. I am going with a very loose visual triangle, but this layout is a little bit of a rule breaker. It started out very centered. The pocket cards were centered on the background, and that title is very centered as well. The thing is though, when I moved my photo more towards the right, it has changed the balance of the page. So I want to balance things back out. I'm going to do that with my embellishment clusters. I'm going to have a small one to the right of my photo. See the little squirrel up the top there? The candy cane will be the second point in my visual triangle, and then that red stocking, that's actually going to be the third point in the visual triangle, and I have very purposefully positioned that very centered. It's my hope that by centering that one, I'm going to tie everything back in together. I do talk a lot about flow and design on the channel, so if you would like to hear even more about that, be sure to subscribe. I'm now at the point where I want to add in some smaller details and a little bit more texture. I decided on some typed sentiment stickers and the wood buttons that are in this collection. I also did find a really cute little holly leaf that was made of chipboard. I also found some chipboard stars, and they're great because they are textured, but they also have a shiny gold part to them, and that ties in with that puffy sticker that I have in the very center of the page. Up until this point, it was the only gold element on the page, so it was sort of standing out a little too much for my liking. So the gold stars tie everything together. You can see all the details in the close-up images here, the chipboard pieces, the die cuts, and that cut file title. At the end of day 3, I've used up a bunch of my Christmas stash. I've made gift tags, an accordion fold card, and now a scrapbook layout. So what's in store for tomorrow? It is day 4 of trying to make as many Christmas projects as possible with my hard-to-use Christmas stash. So far, I've made gift tags, an accordion fold Christmas card, and a scrapbook layout. This is all part of my 12 Days of Christmas Stash Busting Challenge. Here are the rules. Rule number 1, each project needs to include at least one ugly Christmas pattern paper. I know Christmas sweaters are a thing, but are ugly Christmas papers a thing too? Rule number 2, no new supplies are allowed. I can only use what's in my stash. Rule number 3, projects need to be completed in an hour or less, and be simple and fun to make, so you can join me and create these for your family and friends. I hope you're ready to add some Christmas sparkle into your projects, because today I'm making some surprisingly simple, fast and easy Christmas cards. I'll be creating with 5 separate ugly pattern papers. This is the perfect last minute Christmas card design. We're going to be able to make all 5 of these in less than an hour. I'll start out with a super simple version that anyone can make, and then I'll show you how you can add some sparkle to take this design to the next level. I'll be working with Mittens and Mistletoe collection today, and here's my very first tip for you. If you want to make cards super fast, you need to start out with some pre-made card bases, just like these ones here. The second thing you want to do is keep your design very simple. What's even better is a design that is scalable. What do I mean by scalable? I mean that the design can be scaled to be more complicated or less complicated depending on how much time you have. But that's not all I mean. I also mean scalable in a way that they can be created in batches. Each card that I'll be making today is going to start with a simple pattern paper background. I'll then be adding some form of pre-made sentiment on top. This is an ugly pattern paper challenge, so we better find one. This one's not super ugly, but it is a lot to work with. Normally I would fussy cut out florals like that rather than using them as one full sheet. I've chosen this one too because those wonky lines just make my head hurt. Here's my card base. All I need to do is score it in half. I hope you're ready for some controversy. I know the card purists are going to be mad. I avoid measuring things at all costs because maths is hard. All I do is place the pattern paper over the card base and then mark it with my pencil and cut on that line. For this card, I've done that with my pattern paper and then again with a piece of vellum. I'm also going to use a bunch of these sentiments from this cut apart sheet, so I'll get those ready in advance. The vellum on this card actually has 2 jobs to do. Job number 1 is to make that print on the busy paper there a little more subtle. Job number 2 is to help create a pocket because this card is going to be a shaker card. If you're short on time, skip the shaker pocket part. Just add the pattern paper and then a layer of vellum over the top. If you do have extra time, creating a pocket for some sequins here will take this card to the next level. I've stitched around 3 sides of the card base here, and that creates a pocket and a little opening at the top that I can add the sequins to. Once the sequins are inside, I can then run the top edge through my sewing machine and seal everything up. You'll also notice that I create all of my card fronts very separate to the bases. That's my very simple way to hide the stitching. It's now time to add a sentiment that we pre-cut earlier, and that card is done. On to the next ugly paper because I am using 5 today. This one is hard for me to use because it has snowflakes printed on it. I am going to hide those a little by adding another sheet of vellum here. Look away if you're a card making purist because there is no measuring happening here. I am going to secure the pattern paper to the vellum with a piece of double-sided tape, and I've positioned that in the center because I know my sentiment's going to go on top. I have created another shaker pocket. This one has gold sequins inside, and then I also did add some stitching onto that sentiment piece just to have yet another little detail. I'm sure you're noticing by this point that all of the cards do look similar but different, and that's because they're all just following this same formula, a pattern paper base and then a sentiment on top. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, you can just keep doing what's working. Here's another ugly pattern paper. This one is far too busy for my liking. I'm not going to be adding a shaker to this one because I did want to get all 5 of these cards created in an hour. I do want to do a little bit more though than just the card base and the sentiment. I'm going to go with this really cute blue one here. It does need trimming down a little, and I am going to add stitching. I'm also going to add a small piece of vellum just to mat the sentiment. Any of your leftover vellum scraps are perfect for this idea. The print is still pretty busy, but adding the sentiment on top really does make a difference. This idea is one of 20 ways that I shared in this video right here. It is not part of this series, but I know you'll find it super helpful, so I'll be sure to link it below. It's time to add the card front onto the card base, and I do use double-sided tape for that. For the sentiment though, I do want a little bit of dimension, so I am going to use some 3D foam here. It's a really good detail to add if you're short on time. So if you're not doing the sequin pockets, if you're not adding stitching, I would still recommend that you add in that foam. On to the next ugly pattern paper, and this one is a lot for me. I actually think it's the yellow, and that's funny because I love scrapbook collections with yellow in them, but for this paper, I just feel like it's a little bit too much. Do you like working with the traditional Christmas colours, or do you prefer the more modern ones? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're there, I also want to know if you're joining in on the challenge. What have you been making? Have you shared your projects in the Facebook group? If not, be sure to check the description box below for details on that. The card front is now ready to attach to my base, and I am going to cover up a large portion of this very busy print with this sentiment. That paper is so busy, I needed to choose something very simple in very coordinated colours. And that's my cards complete. I have made all 5 within the hour and used 5 different ugly pattern papers. I could make cards like these all day. There's something special about keeping things simple, especially in this super busy season. Speaking of simple, tomorrow's project starts with one of the most basic supplies that we all have to work with. It's one of my most favourite ideas yet. A few days ago, I realised just how big my Christmas stash was. There was so much of it, it barely fit into this box. This is my stash of Christmas craft supplies. That's when I noticed my unusually large collection of ugly Christmas pattern papers and decided it was time for a Christmas stash busting challenge. And you know what? It's working. It is now day 5 and I have used up a bunch of my stash. Sure, ugly Christmas sweaters are a thing. Are ugly Christmas pattern papers a thing too? Today the plan is simple and it starts with a full sheet of 12 by 12 pattern paper. Today I'm making a one-page wonder interactive mini album. I'll share all the instructions and full measurements as we go along so you can make one too. It's time to get started. For this project, you will want to work with double-sided pattern papers. They will work best. I am going to focus on the busier prints in this paper pad. This is a one-page wonder, so you do need to start with a full 12 by 12 inch sheet. You do need to cut it in half and you need to make sure that the cut runs in line with the print. See how you can see the print running across the length of the paper? Next up, you're going to score this piece at 2 inches and at 7 inches. This is actually going to be the project cover. Be sure to fold the score lines inwards. Set that one aside and then take the second sheet and be sure to flip it over. See how I'm using the opposite side for this part? You're going to score this one at 4 1/4 inches and then at 9 inches. The fold for this one here is a Z fold and I will show you in a moment. You'll also need a circle punch because we're going to make some pockets for our album. Here's a look at the Z fold and it's actually that top section, the smallest bit. That's the bit that attaches to the album cover. I do want to create a couple of cutouts for each of the pockets and I'm going to use the circle punch to do that. This one is really good actually because there's a guide there to let you know where halfway through the circle is. I'll be sure to link it below along with all the other supplies I'm using. It's time to assemble the album, and we are going to work from the back of the album towards the front. Remember the smaller section of the Z fold that I pointed out earlier? Well, it's going to attach to the back cover. Notice here that I had to adjust the fold. It is still a Z fold, but it is actually the opposite direction to what I showed you earlier. It's actually better when those folds are loosened up a little bit, so you will want to fold them in both directions when you first score them. It's time to create another pocket. This is actually the end piece of that Z fold, and I am going to fold it down inside the book there. I'm also going to add a smaller pocket inside the front cover. You can really customize these mini albums. This is really just one template, but you can mix and match the flaps and the inserts to your heart's content. I will walk you through all the albums that I've made and all of the changes and tab options that you have. See, this one here has two. Instead of the one pocket, I made it two separate pockets. To add even more interest and to use up a little more of my pattern papers, I created like a photo mat on some of the pages. This one here on the left was used to cover up some of that bolder nutcracker paper. It adds a really nice contrast. With the albums constructed, let's make them pretty and fill them up. The first thing I need to do is batch cut a bunch of tags. This is the perfect opportunity to use up your scraps. If you're going to go with the option of two pockets, these tags are the perfect size to fit inside them. I have trimmed off a very small section at the base of the tags, and that's just so that they will clear that edge so that you can fold the album. Be sure to work with double-sided papers even for this embellishing part. It gives you the option to flip the papers over and work with a print that's not so busy. I've made the pocket at the back here a little bit larger so the tags will actually fit upright, and you can also pop in there a little packet of tea. I really wanted to have lots of options for tucking all kinds of bits and pieces inside of these. As they fill up, they will no longer sit flat, so we do need a way to secure them. The simplest way to do this is with ribbon. And I do want to add it in a way that the ribbon doesn't come loose. You could just add it at the end, but I really wanted a way to fix the ribbon into the album. So I'm going to add it into my paper layers here. I find that doing it this way really adds an extra level of detail to the album, and what it will mean is that over time the ribbon will not get lost. It will always stay attached to the album. I'm using satin seam binding for this one. It's a lovely flat ribbon, so it's going to be able to be sandwiched just between two paper layers. I'm using double-sided tape for this, and you could add stitching if you wanted to make it extra secure. With that done, I am going to add a large chipboard element to the front cover. I really want a statement piece for each of these. You could keep it super simple, just like this example here, or you could invest a little more time and add in some extra paper layers. So have I just totally lost track of time and made a bunch of these? Yes, I have. Let me show you what I've done. Some of them I've kept more simple than others, but they all follow this same format that I just showed you with the template. So this one is really just an extra layer of paper on the front. I have layered the ribbon in between the top layer of paper and an embellishment. This one was on vellum, so it was getting lost when I placed it directly onto this pattern paper. So I've just layered in a piece of white cardstock in between, and then that's just a little chipboard embellishment. I love this ribbon. I've been hoarding this ribbon, so it's nice to actually get it onto some really cute little projects. Let's open this one up. So this was one that had, all of them have the pocket here. And then I did show you two options for this pocket. One was a single pocket, which gives you a little more space and a larger size to work with. And then there is another one with the two pockets with a seam down the middle here. So I've really just added this embellishment here. I wanted to keep these super simple so that you could customize it as you want to.
I have also actually changed up the pocket on the back here. There's a couple of options for that as well. And then added in an extra sheet of paper here. I feel like this is just a really good idea to be able to stick in lots of different things. Let me show you. So you could use it as like a little mini scrapbook album. You could pop your photos in here. You could actually like mount them and decorate it as if it was a mini scrapbook album. Or you could use it as like a bit of a gift thing. I think I might do this for my daughter's Nana, my mum, and give her like a little Christmas gift of some family photos and tuck them in. You can also tuck in like little tags. This is one I've kind of embellished. So it's not just a plain tag. I've added a little chipboard element, and so you can tuck those in. But you can also tuck in the back here like a little cup of tea, or even maybe for Happy Mail. Imagine getting a lot of little coordinating embellishments and tucking them in. I wanted to leave this part free because I feel like if you wanted to write a letter, you could put that on lined paper and then stick that in there as well. So if you were sending this off to, say, maybe family and friends abroad who haven't seen your family for the year, you wanted to send them a couple of really nice new photos to update them, and then yeah, you could write a note. Lots and lots and lots of different options. And that's also why I went with a ribbon closure. So actually, let's put this back in so you can see. Even if this does get a little bit more bulky, let's put all of these tags in. Just let's be really generous and assume that we're putting lots of things in. Let me see if I can find a letter. I couldn't find one, but this one would work. So say we put a letter in there as well, maybe a gift card, something like that. So it is now a little bit bulkier, you can see there, but the ribbon will hold it all together for you. And I still like, it's still very flat. This is a very flat, very postable little mini journal or card. So that's that one all tucked back in. Yeah, I really love this ribbon. It's the perfect shade of Christmas red. Then I did this one. This one's got a lot of layers on the front. So it's got the standard piece of paper, and this one is actually a little bit shorter. You'll see it's a little bit shorter. That's because it was a paper scrap. So you can use your paper scraps in your layers. And then can you see there? It's a vellum shaker card. So those sequins do actually move within the little shaker there. And then a chipboard embellishment, and then a sticker for the sentiment. And they've just been glued on and layered up. And then I've used a softer ribbon for this one. Let's take a look inside. So I've kept this one pretty simple. It does show you the two pockets. So you can see the seam that I've created down the middle there, and then I've added glue. So the pockets are separate from each other. So they also do fit a tag. So I think I did trim off, yeah, I'm sure I did. Yeah, I did have to trim off a little bit of the tag so that it would fit into this part here, because you do want it to clear the fold. So there's two tags in there. You could even wrap washi tape maybe around one of these tags and give it as a Happy Mail. Put some washi tape strips around there, and then some other Christmas embellishments, and give it away as Happy Mail. Love this little pocket at the front. Kept this very simple just so that you could see that, and then the simple pocket at the back. So that one came together in no time at all, even though it did have quite a lot of detail on the front. And as with everything, you could spend half an hour doing one of these, or you could spend 2 hours doing one of these and just like really go to town, layer up all your embellishments and details. I wanted to show you how quickly they could come together, because that's the aim of the game for the 12 days of Christmas, is to be able to make lots of different projects in reasonable amounts of time. So next up is this one. I really wanted a clean, fresh look for this. It also has a shaker pocket. These do move around in here, as you can see, and a nice bright white ribbon for this one. Inside we have our standard pocket for the inside and here. I think for me, I would prefer this size pocket only because I just feel like you've got more options to put things in there. Whereas the two single pockets, you were a little bit more restricted. I do like the look of the tags that go this way though. They are fun, but you could still even do that in this pocket. This one needs trimming slightly. See how it extends over here? You don't want that. You'll need trimming ever so slightly. These ones are a good fit though. The tea bag fits in there. You could even put a pocket on the outside here, so you could get a strip of paper and just attach it as a pocket on the outside and have your things tucked this way. Lots and lots and lots of different options with these. And then there's a single pocket at the back. I do like the nutcracker paper. I kind of, that nutcracker paper got lost in this, got covered up a lot. So I might even pull out for this one, I might even pull out another sheet of it and put it here. But you don't have to. You can leave it exactly as it is. You could just get some plain lined paper and then even pop it in there and make it like a little notebook cover. Lots and lots of options. Really like the white ribbon on that one. That's a really pretty ribbon. I don't have any more of that either. And then there's this one. This one I wanted to do a little more like not kid friendly, but just sort of play with the idea of like Santa and have yeah, Santa and very simple embellishments. This is a chipboard frame, and then I've just layered a couple of other chipboard pieces on top. I do like the shine of this pattern paper. How pretty is that? And this was the one that was a bit busy for me. This one is, it's cute, but it is a lot. So I do quite like it teamed with these other more neutral ones. And then I've gone with the single pocket again for this one. So very cute. I like that you can see more of this nutcracker pattern paper. See what I mean? This one shows through a lot more than the other one. Just depends how you go about your folding and your scoring. So yeah, added a bit more of that in there. So that's that one. One more to go. There's that one, the ribbon back in place. Super pretty, isn't it? Really like that one. And then lucky last is another shaker. This one has tiny little stars in it. This shaker's really cute because those stars are just so tiny. Very cute. And then lots of layers of chipboard here. I do like the stitched element. You don't need to add that. It does add a little bit of extra time, but it is a really lovely detail. And I love that it adds sort of like texture and layer without adding any bulk. And then another big pocket. You can see I prefer the big pocket. I did most of them like that. I just felt like it's more versatile for me for tucking in the things that I want to tuck in. If my daughter gets Santa photos this year, I could tuck that photo in there. Just gives me far more options, I feel, than the two single pockets. And then there's that. These are so fun to make. I could spend all day just sitting down and creating a bunch of these and using up my stash. So I hope I've inspired you to make some for your family.
If you happen to be behind on your Christmas scrapbooking and love using sequins in your projects, you're going to love tomorrow's video. I will be scrapbooking, and I'll also be sharing a fun way that you can transform an ugly pattern paper. 6 days ago, I set myself the challenge to make as many Christmas projects as possible using up my forgotten Christmas stash. This is my stash of Christmas craft supplies, and this is the box they're supposed to fit into. My crazy big idea was to use as many ugly pattern papers as possible. I know ugly Christmas sweaters are a thing, but are ugly Christmas papers a thing too? It is day 6 and I've already created gift tags, an accordion fold Christmas card, scrapbook layouts, interactive mini albums, and more. Today, I'll be creating a scrapbook layout that has a super fun interactive element. It's time to pull out your Christmas photos, sequins, and 2 full sheets of ugly Christmas pattern paper. You're gonna love this idea. I'll be working with Pink Fresh Studios' Oh What Fun collection today, and here's a look at my chosen ugly papers. More on those in a moment. First, I want to show you the cut file that I'll be working with. This one is the exclusive December design for the cut of the month, and I'll be sure to leave details in the description box below. This is the first of the ugly papers I'll be using for today's project, and whilst the icons on it are actually quite cute, it's just that they're all a bit too much for me. I am going to be able to use it in small sections though, so I've used it for the frame of my layout, I've used it to back the cut file, and I'm also going to use it to mount my photo. As for the second ugly pattern paper, it's actually the background one that you can see here, and I've already started on my fix for it. I have cut it to size for my background and then layered a piece of vellum on top. I've stitched around the edge, leaving a small gap so that I can add in my sequins. I've turned my background into a super fun shaker pocket. The vellum has two jobs here. It does create that pocket for the sequins, but it also tones back the print on the pattern paper in the background. I know some of you will be saying, that paper's not that ugly, and you know what? You're right. It wasn't that bad. It was just a little bit busy. If I wasn't doing this challenge, I probably would have put this layout on a plain cardstock background, but because I am on this mission to use up these supplies, I really wanted to work with what I had. For this page, that meant choosing the best option that I had from the collection and then adding the vellum to make it more subtle. I'm going with a very centered design for today's page. I'm going to run the cut file down the right and then position the photo towards the left. I'm keen to use one of the pocket page cards as well, and I have found that if I position it super early on in my project, I can get these onto my pages. They are fabulous to add into your paper layers, and I especially love the ones with the titles like this one that says Joyful. I decided against the one that said December because the red was really saturated and it stood out too much. The colours I'm working with are actually quite soft, so I want to continue with that. So with the background sorted, the cut file backed and positioned, and my photo in place, I don't actually have a lot of space for embellishing. I'm going to have to be very mindful to keep these embellishments simple, otherwise it's going to look very cluttered very quickly. The other thing that I do know about myself is that I get overwhelmed when I have lots of choices, so I'm going to immediately start to exclude elements. The easiest place to start with that is by size. I know that I have limited space here to work with, so there are going to be several supplies that are automatically excluded because they're too big. To keep the layout from looking too cluttered, I'm going to keep all of my embellishments within the framework of what's already there. So nothing will extend out past the edges of the cut file or the photo. The second way I'll exclude things is by colour. I already know that I don't want to use that deep dark red, and I'll also exclude the deep blue that's in the collection. Can you see that red sticker that I've positioned that says nice list? Yep, that doesn't stay. For me, it stands out too much. That red is too much of a pop of colour. I think on camera you can see here too that it actually draws out the pops of red in the frame, and I don't want that. I'm actually going for a more subtle, more pastel version of this collection. So I really don't want to make my colours pop here. I want to make them seem more muted. I made one simple change and switched that piece out for this one here. It is still a red and white title, but rather than being on a red background, it's on a white background, and it makes all the difference. Have you been joining in with me on the challenge? I do hope so. It's not too late to join in, and in fact, it's the perfect time for you to be stash busting these supplies. I'll leave a link in the description box below
below and let me know in the comments, what have you been making? This is all looking really good at this point. I am going to focus a little bit on flow. Here I'm thinking about how the eye will travel across the page. Now, naturally, because we have text, it will want to travel left to right, and of course it will be naturally drawn to my photo. So I want to be sure that my visual triangle that I create here fits in the flow of that. I want to work with that, not against it. I talk a lot about flow on the channel, and I actually think it's one of the most important parts of scrapbook design. If you'd like to hear more, be sure to subscribe. I'll also leave some key videos in the description box below for you to watch next. So in creating my visual triangle, I want to replicate some elements. One of the easiest ways for a layout to look really consistent is to repeat icons. And for this layout, I'm actually going to go with the star shape. I knew I did not want to use anything that was rectangular or square. It was feeling a little bit blocky, so I needed to move away from that. I did audition a couple of round elements and they didn't quite fit right. So what was next best option was something that was curved, like the stocking that I end up using in the letter O in love, and that bell. I'm really surprised that the bell did not stay on the layout because I think it actually fits really lovely. I do sometimes wonder what I was thinking when I'm watching these videos back. It's so interesting to see the change in my perspective. Do you think the bell should have stayed? I'm thinking now maybe it should have. That is the layout now complete. Of course, I'm going to leave you with close-up images. I want you to be able to see the very cute shaker pocket in the background there and all of the layers of embellishments.
I'm officially halfway through my 12 Days of Christmas stash busting challenge, and I realised that I haven't yet used any of my Christmas washi tapes. Tomorrow's plan is to fix that. The moment I found washi tape, I loved it. It was an inexpensive supply and there were so many designs to choose from. They were all very collectible. The problem with me and collectible supplies is that I tend to collect more than I use. And that's how I've gotten into this situation. This is my stash of Christmas craft supplies, and this is the box they're supposed to fit into. It is day 7 of trying to make as many Christmas projects as possible with my forgotten Christmas stash, and today's focus is on washi tape. If you're new to this series, here are the rules. Rule number 1, each project needs to include at least one ugly Christmas pattern paper. Rule number 2, no new items allowed. I'm only to use what's in my stash. Rule number 3, projects need to be created in an hour or less. They need to be fun and easy to make so that you can make them too. Let's see just how much washi tape I can use as I make this layered scrapbook page.
I'll be creating with mittens and mistletoe for this project, and here's a look at the photo I'm documenting. Of course, I have a plan for the washi tape. I'm going to be working with these two here, and I'm going to start by running a strip along the edge of a scrap piece of cardstock. I'm going to be working with an unusual punch today. This one is called a tab punch, and it's actually normally used in offices, particularly in filing cabinets to label the folders. I actually use this punch quite a lot, and I think you will too. I'll be sure to link it below. You could use up any of your paper scraps to do this. You do need to be aware though that the washi tape is a little bit see-through. So if you are going to cover up a pattern paper, be sure to choose one that has a very pastel print. I've found too that this technique works best when you're working with contrasting colours for your washi tape. We are going to create some rows with these in a moment, and I found that it always looks best when you have colours that are quite different from each other.
This project uses ideas from my 30 ways with washi tape video that I shared earlier this year. If you haven't seen that one and you have a bunch of washi tape in your stash, I'll leave a link to it in the description box below.
Here's a look at all of my punched out pieces. The other thing I did want to mention here was that this technique works best with the wider washi tape. Ideally, you'll want a washi tape that is wide enough to cover the full width of your punched pieces. I am going to create a couple of rows of tabs along the bottom edge here of the layout. I've used my T-square ruler and a pencil to mark a line so that I can check that everything is nice and straight. I am gluing them down with a liquid adhesive, but I'm not applying very much glue because I am going to add some stitching here in a moment. And yes, I am being quite pedantic about everything being nice and straight. It's super important. I've added my stitching to this first row off camera, and it's now time to go in with the second row. Here's where the contrasting colors come into play. So this second row is going to be green, and you also might notice that I'm placing them staggered compared to the first row. You almost want to lay them like bricks. The other thing I probably should have mentioned a little earlier is that first row is centered. I actually marked the 6-inch mark, the center of the paper, and worked from the center outwards. With the second row in place, I can then run it through my sewing machine. Speaking of sewing machines, yes, I have been working on my sewing with paper video. I'm sorry it has been a little bit delayed. Just be sure to subscribe to make sure that you get a notification when it is ready. The third row is now in place, and I do lift up the tabs a little just to create some texture. I am going to sneak in a little extra washi here on my photo mat. I'm going to run strips of washi in the same direction as the stripes on my pattern paper. Once I place the photo on top, this detail will be quite subtle, so you will want to choose a washi tape that has a bit of shine or a special detail on it to help it stand out. You can just do one corner. I'm going to do 2 corners in this case, the top left and the bottom right, and that is purely decided by the direction of the stripes. I can now start to build out the design for the page. I am going to use the washi tape as an anchoring point. I do know that I want to have some kind of cluster in my photo at the bottom of the page here. I'm just not quite sure what that's going to look like. It's funny, normally I do go in with a pretty clear plan of the design and the flow for the page, but for this one, I think I was so focused on the washi tape that I kind of forgot that I also have to design the layout. I'm such a professional scrapbooker, oh dear. I don't make you watch my struggle street. I eventually decided that I would not think about that anymore, and I would create a row of tabs at the top. And here you can see I do toy with the idea of actually positioning the photo on that top banner. I was thinking maybe if I had the photo at the top, I could balance that out with an embellishment cluster here at the bottom. And even watching this back now, I feel like something like that could work, just not for this layout. So here's what I settle on. I want to create a base for my photo. I don't want to put pattern paper there because that's going to look too blocky, but I did have a bunch of chipboard frames from this collection. So I'm going to cluster the frames around the edge of my photo. The other thing that becomes quite clear at this point is that I will need to add an extra row to the tabs at the top. You'll see there too that I finally nut out the flow. I'm going to keep all of my elements slightly to the right. I could have gone with a much more centered design, but I actually struggle with those. So because we're on this time frame, we're doing 12 days of Christmas together. And remember, I did say that every project should come together within an hour. I made a choice to go with the design that I was more comfortable with. I'll save that idea of a more centered design for another day. Oh yes, here's a little cheat for you. Did you notice that at the beginning of the video, I glued the tabs down with liquid adhesive, and here I'm using my ATG When you glue stuff down with a liquid glue, it is forever. You don't have the option to change your mind. And I still wasn't 200% sure that I wanted to go ahead with this extra strip. So I was able to audition it out by adding it with my ATG tape. Now, sticky tape and sewing machines are not friends. They do not play well together. So you do just have to be careful to add the tape not in the area where you're going to be stitching. It does look good. I'm so glad I added it. I feel like it just finishes off that top section. One strip just wasn't enough. It is time to start embellishing, and I am going to work with the largest embellishments first. If I don't lock them in early, I will actually run out of places to position them. This isn't that big of a deal when you have lots to work with, because if things are too big, you can switch them out for smaller ones. When it becomes a problem is when you're working with limited supplies. So it's really good habit to just work into your creative process. I really was keen to get that point sienna on this page, but positioned above the photo there, it just felt too big. I do now have a plan for it, and I have to be brave. I do have to trim off that left-hand edge so that I can slide it in under my photo. Chopping chipboard is actually terrifying to me because it's such a permanent change, and if I decide to change my mind, well, then that piece of chipboard's always going to have that edge cut off. Are you like that, or are you more of a caution to the wind kind of creator? Lucky for me, it did work out, and in fact, that poinciana is going to be one of the points of the visual triangle for the page. It will be the main cluster for the page, and then I will have two supporting clusters, one to the left of the photo and one above the photo. At this point, the elements at the top of the page and the pieces at the bottom of the page were still feeling quite separate from each other. They could have stayed that way, but I am really about flowing embellishments. I like to really help the eye be drawn around the page. With them being separate, there was this disconnect that I really wasn't keen on. I do want to fill in that space between the photo and the top banners, but I do want it to be somewhat subtle. My trick is to use white on white embellishments. I found a mostly white sentiment to use and then two puffy stickers in the shape of snowflakes. It is somewhat of a questionable choice because there is no snow here at Christmas time, not even close to it. But I am working with what I have. We are stash busting. Things are getting serious because I'm gluing stuff down. I found a couple of banner pieces in with the puffy stickers, and they actually work really well with those punched out tabs. I found one in green and one in pink, so I'm going to add both of those. And we all know that 3 is a fabulous number for a scrapbook layout, so I did find an extra banner in the chipboard pieces. And that's the layout done. Of course, I'll leave you here with some close-up images. I want you to be able to see all of those lovely details.
Tomorrow I'm using a collection I have never used before. It's been in my stash for over a year now and remains untouched. Not because it's ugly, but because I've been saving it for something special. It is day 8 of trying to make as many Christmas projects as possible with my forgotten Christmas stash. So far, I've made gift tags, interactive mini albums, Christmas cards, and 3 scrapbook layouts. But there's a collection in my stash that I have not even touched yet. Not because it's ugly, but because I've been saving it for something special. Do you do that? Save supplies up for a special project and then never get to it. Guilty. Today's the day to change that. What's the special project I'll be making? Super cute mini flip books. Perfect for special paper because they make the most adorable handmade gifts.
This project is perfect for a collection just like this one. This is Pebbles Ink Merry Little Christmas. You will also need an envelope punch board. I'll be sure to link it below. First up, we need to start with a 6 by 6 inch piece of paper. Now, you could use one from a paper pad or use up some paper scraps. In my case, I have neither of those things. I'm going to take my 6 by 6 inch squares and I'm going to create 3 envelopes per mini album. In this video, I'll be making 2, so I'm going to create 6 envelopes in total. Here's a sneak peek of how these are going to come together. And yes, I did forget to round the top corner here, so I am going to go ahead and fix that. Back to the project, it is now time to assemble the album itself, and you'll see here that I'm actually stacking the envelopes together. Oh yes, I need to show you this bit. This bit's really important. You don't want your envelope to be completely flat. We want to actually create some space for the goodies that we're going to put inside. To create that space, you need to do a double score line on the flap that folds over, so the top part of your envelope. Essentially, what you're doing is creating a gusset. It sounds complicated, but all you need to do is score that top flap twice and make the space that's between the scores about 1/4 inch. From there, you can glue your album together like so. Just be sure to alternate the prints on your pattern papers. Next up, you'll want to trim the front cover. You are going to trim that entire flap off, and you'll find now that the front cover sits flush with the right-hand side of the album. That is the base of the album now all constructed. It is time to decorate. I'm going to start by adding a paper layer to the front cover. I do want to add some stitching details to this project, and you can't really do that onto the base here. And that's right, I am such a rebel. I do not measure anything. I simply mark the spot that I need to cut with a pencil and use that as a reference in my trimmer. If you need to make a few of these, they will come together faster if you batch the steps. So I stitched around the edge and this front piece is ready to attach, but I almost forgot a step. When the mini album gets full, it will need some kind of closure. And for that, I'm going to use this very thin satin ribbon. What you'll want to do is secure it in place before adding on that paper layer. I'm just doing that with double-sided tape, and then the paper layer itself will help secure it in place. Doing it this way gives you a really clean finished look, and what happens is that the ribbon stays secured to the album, so in the future the ribbon won't ever get lost. Up until this point, these albums are identical, which is again a really good way to create them if you're going to make a few in one go. Don't worry if you're concerned that they're all going to look the same, because I promise they won't. Here's where they all get their own little bit of uniqueness. I'm going to keep things very simple for the front cover and just center a single embellishment. If you're digging through your stash and thinking about what collection you could use for this project, I would suggest getting one that has quite large ephemera pieces. Sometimes they are tricky to use up on cards and in scrapbook layouts, but they will be perfect for this project. So yes, just a single die cut piece for the front cover. And now the goodies to go inside. Inside the back pocket here, I'm going to pop a tea bag. And yes, I did choose the flavour of the tea based on the colour of the bag. There are a few red and green options, including peppermint. I'll decorate this back pocket with, again, a single embellishment piece. I am going to raise them up on foam just for a little bit of dimension. You could go all out decorating these, depending on just how much time you have. I am trying to keep all of the projects in the challenge to under an hour long, so I did keep it very simple in this case. I really like the look of the simplicity as well. Next up, you're going to need some of these clear resealable bags, and I'm actually going to turn this mini album into a bit of a happy mail for a creative friend. I want to include a couple of extra die cut pieces in that little baggie that she can use on some of her festive projects. I have one more pocket to fill, and that is going to be this center one, which fits a gift card inside perfectly. So I'm going to fill up this little pocket with lots of little embellishments, just a really nice mix of things that I think she will find useful. Seal it on up and then pop it inside. There are lots of items that you can choose to add in this little baggie. I actually want to do one with sequins. You could also add in chocolate. Just be sure to choose a bar that is really flat. I did try to add in a Cadbury Santa, but it was too thick. I think I'd need something more like one of those lint blocks. With the pockets all filled up with goodies, it is time to finish off the embellishing. I just mixed and matched elements from the collection and really just chose one piece per pocket. Super simple, no embellishment clusters to worry about, and it helps everything sit a little bit flat. Oh yes, I did want to show you this. If you want to include a little Christmas note as well, you can. It does tuck in there very easily. You can see here now why we need the ribbon. The album will not sit flat now that it's filled up with goodies. The ribbon keeps everything nice and secure, and it kind of turns it into a fun little gift that you can unwrap. It's time to fill up the next album. I do like a couple of the elements here that are more faith-based. So there's the nativity, and there was some quotes that was like joy, peace, and love. Really love those. So this one is going to a very special friend. I'll tuck that into the front pocket. I do have to get her gift card though. I don't have that quite yet. Let's just wrap it up and keep it all secure. If you're wondering about the specific supplies that I'm using, I will be sure to link everything below for you, even if it's something that I find that is very similar. While you're there, be sure to let me know, are you playing along and what projects have you made? You can also share them in my Facebook group. The creative friends over there love seeing Christmas projects. And that's these cute little mini albums complete.
Every paper crafter has these paper scraps, and we are always on the lookout for ways to use them up. So in the next video, I'll be sharing my ideas for using up those pesky paper scraps. Do you remember the quote, "In this world, nothing is certain except death and taxes"? Well, I feel for paper crafters, it should be death, taxes, and paper scraps. We all have them, and we're all looking for ways to use them up. Today is day 9 of making as many Christmas projects as possible with my forgotten Christmas stash. And today's focus is on paper scraps. I'll be turning them into beautiful last-minute Christmas cards. You do still have time to make these, but we better get started.
Here's a look at the scraps I'll be working with today. I have also gone ahead and prepared some card bases. I've also grabbed some of my least favourite cardstock and created the card front bases. Now that cream cardstock in the end you will not see, so you could use up any of the cardstock that's in your stash for this idea. Essentially, for all the cards I'm making today, I'm going to use my scraps and paper piece them onto that base. Whenever you're working with paper pieces that are too small to fit your card front, this technique works a treat. This is the one trick that I use every time I want to use up paper scraps. I'm going to work with paper strips and punches for card number 1, and this here is actually the branding strip off of a 12 by 12 sheet of paper. I'm going to use 2 of those strips and layer them onto my card, one at the top and one at the bottom. Next, I'm going to layer in some paper strips that I have cut with my paper punch. This one is just a border punch, and I have trimmed down one side of the paper strip. I'm going to layer them up and overlap them slightly. They're going to create a bit of a ruffle-like texture towards the bottom of the card here. To get a really nice finish, I like to extend the paper scraps actually over each edge of my card base there, and then flip it over and trim it. I found a paper scrap that covers the remaining area on my base, and then I have added a stitched detail. All of our cream card base is now covered. I have added a sentiment, and then this entire piece can be added to the card base. There are so many benefits to creating your cards in this way. I love that I can add stitch details and you don't get them showing through on the inside of the card. They're all hidden behind that front cover there. I love just how easy it is to use up even the smallest scraps. And I love that the extra layer of cardstock actually gives the card a little bit more stability. It feels really substantial when you hold it, and I really like that. I have my paper punches out again for this second card. This is another edge punch that I'm working with. For this design, I'm going to work from the center outwards. So I did start with that larger paper strip. I don't think it was quite long enough to fit the length of my card. So I do need to trim it and work across the width of the card instead. I'm actually letting the paper scraps determine the design, not the other way around. I don't start with an idea for the card first. I actually just see what I have and see how those paper layers can combine to cover my card front. I found a fun sentiment and now it's time to add the stitching. This entire piece can now get added onto my card base. This next card is perfect to make if you have a bunch of smaller paper scraps. This is a 1¼ inch square punch, and I am going to choose a selection of papers and just punch out a bunch of squares. You don't need to be too fussy with the papers that you choose. I have found though that this idea works best when the papers are contrasting from each other. Consider contrasting colours. I'm going to go with red and green in this case, but also look at contrasting patterns. Some of the patterns here are florals, others are more geometric, some are busier than others. You're now just going to arrange these onto your card base in a grid format. It's best to work from the center outwards, so I did find the center point at the top there, marked that with a pencil, and I knew that the center of that center square had to line up with that point. So here's a little trick for you. I know that the squares are going to be slightly short on my card base. See how you can see the little strip of cream at the bottom there? I am just going to trim that off. I'm going to make this the new size for this card. This is the perfect example of what I was saying earlier, in that I don't design the card first and then try and find scraps and supplies to fit my design. I actually work with all of the supplies that I have and adjust my design to get the most out of them. Blessed are the flexible, for they shall not be bent out of shape. That's the key part to all of this. If you're really flexible with your ideas and the way that you use up your scraps, I promise you will find that you can use up so many more of them. On to card number 4, and for this one, I wanted to show you an idea that you can use if you have a bunch of thinner paper strips. This idea also works really well with the paper branding strips. I have mixed and matched my colours and designs, and I'm just going to stack them up and layer them across the card base here. I do prefer to use my ATG tape roller to do this because this adhesive is repositionable. If I want to change my mind, it is super easy to lift up the pieces and reposition them. I'll be sure to leave a link for it and the other supplies that I'm using today in the description box below. You have so many options here for the paper strips on your card base. You can use very thin paper strips here. You could just use the branding strips, or you could vary the widths to form a bit of a pattern. From here, I can add my sentiment and my stitching details. The next card I'm working on begins with this paper scrap. It is a leftover piece of cut file that I have cut, and I'm actually going to use it just as a paper layer. I am cheating here a little bit because, yes, that piece of pattern paper does fit the full width and height of my card base. So I'm not really piecing paper together here, but it is still a paper scrap. I have chosen contrasting colours yet again. I just wanted the white of the cut file to really stand out. Even though I'm only working with 2 paper layers here, it is quite busy, so I am going to stick with a very simple sentiment. I was super tempted to add this die cut in, but I was concerned that I was covering up too much of that cut file. So what I thought I would do instead is use these 2 pieces to inspire the next card. Time to lock the sentiment in. It is mounted on 3D foam, and that's a nice little finishing touch. It's time to build out the base for this next card, and I wanted to show you this really cute idea again for your paper strips. You can turn any paper strip into a banner. All you need to do is fold it in half lengthways like so, and then trim the end with your scissors. You're going to be cutting through 2 layers of paper at once, and that's actually what makes the banner symmetrical. The idea I have for this card is to create 2 or 3 of these banner pieces in varying widths and sizes and run them from the left-hand edge across the card. So this one is not a centered design. In fact, it will be very heavily weighted towards the left. When positioning your banners, you'll want to place them so that they are slightly staggered. This is going to create a little shelf for our gingerbread people to sit on. I do have the tiniest piece of the cut file left over, and I kind of want to get that used all up, so I am going to layer that in behind them as well. It did feel a little bit lost back there, so I am actually going to back the cut file in this darker contrasting paper. It is the same paper that I've used in the layers for the last card, so I know it's going to look really good, and I feel like it will make it feel more substantial to be backed. I do feel like it's worth the little bit of extra time to do that. With that now back into position, I can add the sentiment at the top. I'm going to use 3D foam tape for that, and I am going to add stitching around the entire edge for this one. I can now attach all of this onto my card base, and that's another card done. Here's a close-up look at all 6 cards that I've made today. You can see all the lovely details and those paper layers.
Could punches and Christmas paper be the ultimate holiday combination? They sure did come in handy for making these last-minute Christmas cards. Tomorrow, I'm going to use them to create a fun Christmas scrapbook layout. This idea is for all of those long, skinny paper scraps that I know you have. Some of the first tools that many of us paper crafters buy are paper punches. What tends to happen though over time is that we forget about them. They get popped into a drawer and not used nearly as much as they should be. It is day 10 of my Christmas stash busting challenge, where I'm creating as many Christmas projects as possible to use up my forgotten Christmas stash. Yesterday, I used my punches to create some simple last-minute Christmas cards. And while they're still on my desk, I thought, why not create a scrapbook layout? This idea is perfect for those Santa photos we all have. It's time to get started.
I'll be creating with mittens and mistletoe collection today, and here is my ugly pattern paper. This print is far too busy for my liking, especially considering I'm working with this photo. I'm also working with this cut file. I'll be sure to link it below. I've cut it out super large. I wanted to fill the entire background of the layout. I won't be backing the design today because I just don't have time for that. Remember, all of these projects that are in the 12 days of Christmas need to be completed within an hour. I want the cut file to sit flat to the background, so I am going to glue it into position. I did want to show you here though just how little glue you need. I put the smallest amount ever on my cut files because I don't want any of the glue oozing through to the edges. It's not a very nice look. If ever I'm working on large areas of a cut file, I find it easier to do it backwards, just like I have there. Once my glue was all dry, I did run this through my sewing machine just to add a little stitched detail. It's time to pull out my ugly pattern paper, and I am using one of the strategies I talked about in depth in this video here. If you have a bunch of ugly papers in your stash, you need to watch that one. I'll also leave a link in the description box below. So here's what I found. Ugly papers tend to be much less ugly when they're used in small sections. So that is the big strategy that I'm going to use on this layout. I've pulled out my border punch and I'm going to create some paper strips. I've also found a contrasting pattern paper in the collection and I'm going to repeat the process with that one. I'm then going to cut these pieces into 6-inch lengths and make them not quite so wide. I've done this with quite a few different border punches now, and the strips always look better when they're a little bit thinner. With that done, I'm going to mount my photo and then nut out the design for the page. I do have the cut file in the background and it is running landscape, so very left to right. It's also text, so your eye will want to naturally read that left to right. So I've got to keep with the flow of all of that. That leads me to want to put the photo on the left, and therefore my paper layers, these strips that we've created, will go on the right. I talk a lot about flow and layout design on the channel, so if you're not already, I would love it if you would subscribe to learn more. So I do need to show you how to make these layers, and it is a bit tricky because you have to pre-plan their position. You also have to work from the bottom up. I position the first row and secure it with a liquid adhesive. Once that's dry, I then add a stitched line across the top edge. I then come back to my desk and position the next row. I then add the stitching again along that top edge of the banner piece. I use my T-square ruler as I'm going to make sure everything is very, very straight. I just continue to work row by row from bottom to top. The other thing that I'll mention here is that when you're placing the rows, you'll want to stagger them slightly. Do not line them up perfectly. You want the edge on the right there to be staggered and interesting, and you don't want the scallops to be exactly aligned. Once all your rows are in place, you can then add the texture. So I just pop my finger in between the rows and ruffle them up a little bit just to stop them from being so flat on the page. I also do like to vary the lengths of the rows. That top row is generally a little bit shorter than the rows below it. So that's the bones of the layout sorted. I know my photo is going on the left. I've got my ruffles, which are actually going to form a bit of a base for my embellishment cluster. That's there on the right. It's now just a matter of auditioning embellishment pieces. I am going to work largest to smallest. I'm working through the chipboard pack here and I have emptied it out onto my desk on the right there. You'll see the little bowl that's just out of camera. Anytime that I exclude a chipboard piece, it goes into the bowl. That allows me to focus on the elements that I know will work. I get overwhelmed when I have too many possible choices that I can make, so I do find that excluding elements really helps in speeding up my design process. This embellishment pack is a really good example of it. I started with almost a full pack here, and one by one I'm making really quick decisions to exclude elements. I think I was only left with maybe 4 or 5 pieces that I thought could work, and that really helps me to focus in on those. It's time to pull out another punch. This one is a very basic heart shape. I'm going to punch punch out 4 or 5 of these and run them along the top edge of those banner pieces. I felt like it just needed a little extra detail there, and I do love creating with my paper punches. They are such a great way to extend your stash. You don't need nearly as many embellishments when you can just punch out as many hearts as you like. Have you been using your paper punches much lately, or have they been hidden in a drawer? Let me know in the comments below what your favourite punch is, because I might need to add it to my stash. I am going to continue to build out the layout from this section. My photo isn't stuck down yet, so I need to get that sorted. I don't want to do it though until I have nutted out this embellishment cluster. I really want the cluster to nestle into the photo, that right-hand edge there. So it will take a little bit of fussing, and I'll need to know exactly where everything is placed before I stick my photo down. I'll have a think about that while I work on this section of the layout. Everything on the page is linked, even if it's not touching each other. So it is important to know exactly where you're going before you glue things down. I'm going to stick with that scalloped element there on the right of the photo. I like that it's got scallops because it ties into the scallops on those punched borders, as well as the tops of the hearts. They all have a similar shape, and that helps tie everything together. Did you notice that I glued my photo down with liquid adhesive? I don't know what I was thinking, because I would never normally do that. I would normally just use double-sided tape and then keep the liquid adhesive for my embellishments. So continuing on with the embellishment clusters, I know I want to bring in a few more elements that are rounder in nature. I do have a lot of rectangular shapes happening here with the text in the background, my photo, and those banner strips. So the elements I'm pulling in now, I want to have a more curved feel about them. I do like these super cute little presents though. I like too that they fit with the horizontal flow of the page. I love the little birdie too that's perched just above my photo. I did find this super cute little banner that I can't wait to use. I love that it links the little bird to the presents on the right. I will lock into position these top elements first though. I just want to make sure I know exactly where they're going to be placed. I've popped a few of the elements here up on foam tape just for a little bit of extra dimension. Things are certainly getting serious because I am gluing stuff down. It was at this point that I remembered the collection has puffy stickers. I love the different texture and dimension that these add to a project, so I am going to find a couple that I can nestle in here. The layout is getting closer to complete, but it does feel to me as if it still needs a sprinkling of something. This is a random pack of chipboard pieces that I have in my collection. I don't have any other of the matching supplies for this, but a couple of the pieces in here are going to be perfect for this page. I'm going to go with this piece that says photo opportunity, as well as some cute little snowflake icons. I'm going to use those in the same way that I would use enamel dots and just sprinkle them around the page. I'm going to end up using 7 because that is one of my favorite numbers when scrapbooking. I did make a video on that. I'll leave that in the description box below. With those in place, that's the layout complete. I especially love embellishment clusters that nestle in together like this. It's all just so fun. I know you love to see close-up images, so I'll be sure to leave them here. You can see the layers of the cut file and the stitching details, and then of course all of those paper strips are layered up to create the ruffle.
I feel like it's been a whirlwind 10 days. I have made so many Christmassy projects. I was thinking though, while I still have my punches on my desk and these paper scraps kicking around, why not make one last scrapbook layout? I want to use a super simple paper punch that we all have to create a feature element for my page. Welcome to day 11 of my 12 Days of Christmas Stash Busting Challenge. I'm creating as many Christmassy projects as possible with my forgotten Christmas stash. Do you remember this box? This is my stash of Christmas craft supplies, and this is the box they're supposed to fit into. Even after making gift tags, a bunch of Christmas cards, interactive mini albums, envelope flipbooks, and 4 scrapbook layouts, I am quietly concerned that my supplies will still not fit into that tiny box. That tiny box. That's a problem for another day. Today, I'm creating with this. The star of today's project is this very humble square paper punch, and I'm going to use it to create a feature element for my page. It's time to get started.
I'll be creating today with Mittens and Mistletoe collection, and this one is perfect for all those paper scraps that you have lying around. The punch I'm working with today is 1¼ inches square, and I'm going to start by punching out a bunch of squares from some paper scraps. Notice that I'm holding the punch upside down. That's so that I can see exactly what section of the print I'll be punching out. It's a great way to see if your punch is aligning with the print on the paper, but it also is a way for me to avoid sections of blue in this print here. For this pattern, I want to make sure that I include a lot of those red stripes. I wouldn't be able to do any of this if I was holding the punch the other way. I'm looking for 5 different prints here. Be sure just to use what you have. 5 is a good number I've found to work with. Choose papers that coordinate with each other because they will be sitting side by side on the layout, but it's also a good idea to choose contrasting prints. I'm going with florals and geometrics, and I am being sure to include some of those papers that I find a little bit trickier to use. I am going to need 2 squares of this brown paper as well, because if you haven't noticed up to this point, we're going to be making a Christmas tree. These 2 brown squares will form the tree trunk. I'm not sure exactly where the tree needs to be, so I want to work with a repositionable adhesive. My ATG is perfect for this. If you don't already have a tape runner just like this one, you need one in your stash. I'll be sure to link it and all the other supplies that I'm using today in the description box below. I'll start by positioning the tree slightly to the right. I want to leave some space here on the left for my photo. You can see here that I'm already adjusting things as I go along. I've also got my T-square ruler very handy because there's no print or pattern in the background of this layout. I don't have a print here in the background to use as my guide, so I am going to rely on my T-square ruler to make sure everything is perfectly straight. So each row of the Christmas tree has 1 fewer square in it. So at this point, the bottom row has 5 squares, the second bottom row 4, then 3, then 2, then 1. And I was really feeling like it was too small. The tree needed to be bigger. So what I'm going to do is add an extra square onto each of these rows. See how the tree feels more substantial now? It fills up more of that background space, and I feel like it's in a better proportion to my photo. What that has meant is that I've had to shuffle my tree trunk back towards the right. You do want to center it on your tree. While I lock that last row into place, I am going to make some minor adjustments in the order of the squares. You want them to look as though they've been placed in a random order, but you also need to make sure that all of the prints are quite balanced on the tree. Keep in mind here too where your photo will be placed, because the photo is going to cover up some of these squares. I've added stitching for some extra detail, and I have just added simple rows that go across the tree. What I want to do now is curl up each of the squares. I'm looking to create a bit of texture here. Even if you decide not to do the stitching for your page, I would still recommend doing this step. It just adds this lovely detail to the background of your page. There is one other thing that I really wish I had have done for this layout. I'll get to that in a moment. Before that, I want to talk a little bit about the embellishments for this page. So photo is going to go on the left where you see it right there. And all of my embellishments are actually going to essentially decorate the tree. That was one of the things that really helped pull this page together quickly. Once I had the tree and the photo in position, I had already sorted out the flow for the page. I feel like the eye will be led from the top of the tree down to the trunk of the tree, and of course a little bit left to right because the tree does expand in that direction as it goes towards the bottom. I'm going to work with the chipboard pieces first because they really need to be quite flat to the page. I find if I want to add them later on in the project, it's a little bit harder. The other thing is that most of them were quite large, and I will always work with my embellishments largest to smallest. Here I am doing a sweep through the embellishment pack. Normally I would edit a lot of this footage out, but today I wanted to show you just how I do that. I start with the entire pack in one hand, and then piece by piece I make very quick decisions on it. If it's something I can use for this project, it stays on my desk. If it's something that I can immediately remove, I know it's not going to work, it might be too big, it might be the wrong color, for whatever reason, if I know it's not going to work, it goes into the bowl. I also kind of make it a rule that I can't go back through the bowl. I have to trust that first decision that I've made. This really helps me to focus on the things that I know could work. The other thing that you may have noticed is that while I'm doing that, while I'm going through those pieces, if anything stands out to me to have a place, sometimes I'll look at something and know immediately where it belongs on the layout. I will place it there, then and there. I won't stick it down, but I will position it where I think it should be. It's funny too, because quite often that is where those elements stay. I might audition them in other places, but I would say almost like 80% of the time, where they are first placed in that moment is where they stay. As someone who is a bit of an overthinker, it is actually quite nice and refreshing to press into that. Do you overthink your layouts too? It's so funny, isn't it? So while I've been chatting all about that, I have also been decorating my tree. I found a very cute bird to go at the top of the tree. And then I've got my title, which is going to be Happy Holidays. And then I've just grabbed a bunch of round elements, almost bauble-like, to decorate the tree. I have been avoiding anything that is too square because I want to keep my decorations quite separate from the tree. I am working with several prints here, some of which I'm not terribly fond of, so I am very conscious not to make things look too busy. I thought too that this would be the perfect project for these little dangling charm ornament things. Yes, that is what they're called. I'm going to turn them into Christmas ornaments. Now, I need to tell you what I would change. If I was going to make this layout again, I would have absolutely put some kind of mixed media in my background. Nothing crazy, but I would have added some Distress Oxide with a blending brush underneath the section that the tree is sitting on, just to kind of ground the tree a little bit. It is feeling a little bit plain, that background for me, and I think even just the subtlest amount of a mixed media in the background could have made all the difference. I'll have to save that for next time, but you can add it to yours. I hope you are playing along. Even if you're not sharing in the Facebook group, be sure to let me know what you're making in the comments below. I am loving how this is all coming together. things are getting serious because I'm gluing stuff down. I need to add liquid adhesive to the back of these stickers. They have lost all of their sticky. I am going to stitch them down later, but I do need them to stay in place until I do that. The placement of the items on the tree is a little bit tricky because it does start very centered. See how the bird is centered and that title at the top, it's centered as well. But when I get to the area that has the photo, so the photo's on the left, that area on the right, I do move away from a more centered design and try and make it more tree-like. I place the embellishments in the same way that you would place ornaments on a tree. You'll see there too that there is quite a large green circle element on the right. I've gone with a bigger embellishment piece there in an attempt to balance out the photo a little. When I only had small elements on the tree, the balance of the page was a little bit off for me. The other thing I'll mention here is that all of the embellishments on the tree are round in nature. That's because they are representing ornaments for the tree, but also remember we're trying to keep some separation between the tree and its decorations. I mentioned that earlier. It was time now to work on this base area of the tree. I was really happy with the top section, but the bottom felt like it needed something a little more substantial on it. The other thing I noticed was that the tree did not have a bow, and I am all about them bows, so I better fix that. I've popped it up on foam tape, and I am going to add some tape to the title piece here too. I really like how that's now nestled all together there. With the bottom area now looking much better, I can confidently go back and lock into position some of these other pieces. Before I used to record my process, I would actually stop the layout at this point. I would go away for even maybe 10 minutes and come back to the page and look at it with fresh eyes. I found that that was a really good way to make some final adjustments. I don't do that so much while I'm recording now, but what I will do is the moment that I will take is when I'm doing that sweep and gluing things down. I try not to think too much about the page and I just sort of stick and plonk and glue everything down and then try and look at it with fresh eyes from there. That's what I noticed here. That's a chipboard piece and it felt too heavy for that location. So I actually switched it out with a die cut piece. It is exactly the same icon, but the die cut is ever so slightly smaller. Yes, that's the kind of scrapbooker that I am. What do they say? The devil's in the detail? I am almost done here. I am going to add in this puffy sticker. I like that it's sort of a banner style, kind of reinforces the width of the tree there. It's a lovely pop of red as well. I switched up the holly here as well and actually popped it onto my hat. That left-hand edge there was feeling a little bit plain, but I didn't like the look of the paper strip. I felt that the paper strip was a little bit too much, but it needed something. I'll glue down these final pieces and call the layout done. Of course, I also want to share with you close-up images. I want you to see all the details of the paper squares there and the stitching, but then on top of that, those embellishments that look like ornaments. I hand-stitched those with green thread. I love the stitching on my photo and on the tree. Which print was our ugly paper again? I think I made it beautiful.
It feels like Christmas Eve. Tomorrow is the last day of the challenge and I have saved the best project for last. Today I'm turning a plain and boring brown paper bag into the cutest ever Christmas junk journal. If you're looking for a budget-friendly DIY to gift this Christmas, this video is for you. It is day 12 of my 12 Days of Christmas Stash Busting Challenge, where I've been creating as many Christmassy projects as possible. So far, I have made 36 separate pieces, from gift tags to interactive mini albums, Christmas cards, scrapbook layouts, and more. But will it be enough? Will my reduced stash fit into this box? This project is the one that will use up the most of my supplies, and I love that it is a perfect last-minute Christmas gift. Christmas is coming, so we better get started.
For the paper bag journal I'm creating today, I am starting with this paper bag. It is from Woolworths, one of our main grocery stores here in Australia. This idea will work with any brown paper bag that you have, and the first thing that you'll want to do is undo all of the folds and flaps. You'll want to get it as flat as possible, and that also means pulling out these side sections. This one has a gusset almost on the side. You want to pull that out so that you only have a front and a back, and the bag is then very, very flat. Next, chop off the handles. We won't be needing those. I'm also going to chop away that section of the bag that has all the glue on it. This is the bit that's on the bottom of the bag, and no matter how careful you are with pulling it apart, that section always ends up a little bit ratty. To make sure the bag is super flat, you can score the edges with a bone folder because we now need to do a little bit of measuring. I'm going to chop off around 3 inches from the top of the bag. That's the section that has the reinforcing stuck inside for the handles. We won't be needing any of that. I really just want to be left with 2 very plain paper bag sides. My journal ends up being 9.5 inches high. This is a wraparound journal, so we do need to make 2 score lines. The first one is 6 inches in from the right hand edge. The second one is 6.25 inches in from the left hand edge. Once you've made those 2 score lines, it's ready to fold up the journal. You'll want to turn the left side in first, and then the right side goes in on top of that. It's at this point that I can make any adjustments to the size of the album that I like, and whilst it is a little bit tricky to cut through all of the paper layers at this point, I find that the finish is so much better if you can trim it now. Any of the imperfections in your folding of the bag get covered up by that nice clean cut. You will want to add a little bit of tape to the inside of the bag just to keep the front and back sections stuck together. It's now time to gesso everything. Unfortunately, the logo for Woolworths is this bright green W that you see there. We do not want to see any of that in our finished project, and even though I am going to add some paper on top of this, I don't know what parts of the bag are going to show through and what parts are not. So it is my suggestion that you just add gesso to everything at this point. If you're starting with a bag that is solely brown paper or a pretty one that you don't mind seeing parts of, you can skip this step altogether. Once that's all dry, we can now start on the decorating part. That is essentially the base done. I'm working with 12 by 12 inch pattern papers for this, and because the album is longer than 12 inches, I can't use one sheet to do the entire back or the entire front. That's actually good though, because I can add interest to the album by working in sections. You have a few options here. For this particular album, I used a single sheet of 12-inch paper first. That's the green one there. And I wrapped it around as much as I could to the back. And then I continued on with the red pattern paper and just used that to fill up the back of the album. For the other journal I made, I actually used 2 pieces that were around 10 inches long and just overlapped them at the back. Just use what you have and try and choose papers that are contrasting in colour. Did you spot my ugly paper? Yes, there it is right there, the black and red plaid. Every single project that I've created as part of the challenge has included at least one. I hope you've all been playing along too and using up your stash. For the inside of the journal, I do want to make some pockets. For the back section, I will add a pocket that goes top down, and then the green strip of paper that you see on the left there, that's a pocket for the inside cover. You could certainly add one to the back cover as well. I just chose not to. With all the pockets in place, I was then able to run the entire album through my sewing machine. I've stitched around all of the edges and added some extra stitching to reinforce those pockets. Next, I'm going to work on the inserts, and that's going to use up a heap of my ugly pattern papers. I'm going to work with the full length of the 12 by 12 inch papers, so just fold those in half, and then you'll need to trim them to the height of the journal. If your journal is 9 inches tall, trim these to 8.5 inches. I thought this would be a lovely time to also include some of my junk journal papers. So these are book pages, there was some doilies, a few bits and pieces, not too much though. My real focus was getting these pattern papers used up, so I have only sprinkled those elements in here. For this album, I used 5 pattern papers in total. I'm going to add the signature in here on the left. There's a very good reason for it not to go on the right, and that's because the front cover on the right is actually not wide enough to hide it. And here's the easiest way that I've found to add signatures into an album. The first thing you're going to do is grab yourself a piece of scratch paper, and you're going to cut it to the same height as your signatures. You're going to fold it in half and mark the center, and then place 2 more marks, one halfway between the middle and the top, and the other one halfway between the middle and the bottom. If you're not sure where the middle mark is, you can also just add maybe 2.5 inches above that center line and then go 2.5 inches below the center line. Sometimes I find that's a little bit easier. Now, to poke the holes in the signature, I'm going to use a book to help hold everything in place, and this tool here, which is called an awl, A-W-L. I have tried to do this without one of these tools, and it is very, very difficult. They're really inexpensive. I'll leave a link below, and it really is a game changer. So if you're keen on making these, I would highly recommend you getting one. Using the template as a guide, you can add in the holes in the spots that you marked there for the signature. Then take the signature and place it into the junk journal, just like I have here, and then pop the junk journal back into your book and rest it there. The book really helps everything stay together. I'm then popping the awl through the signature, through those holes I've already made, and adding the extra hole for the journal cover. For me, I found that works better when I do it as 2 separate steps. So rather than placing the signature into the mini album or the junk journal and then trying to push that all the way through, I think it's easier to do the signature separately, then position the signature, and then push the awl through just the journal part. So now we have all of the holes in place. We can then stitch this signature into the cover. The important part is to go down the center hole first. So start in the center of the album and push your needle down towards the outside of the album. Start there first, and then you can choose another hole and go up through the top hole, then back down through the center, and then back up through the bottom hole. So it's like a big number 8, and I do actually repeat that a few times. I do want this to be nice and secure. It is really the only thing that's holding this entire book section of the junk journal to the cover. With that done, you can tie everything off here, and I actually don't mind leaving these threads a little bit long. I don't cut them super short. I don't mind the look of that. I feel like it adds to that handmade feeling of the journal. You can see here how everything flips open. So you open that front cover and then the other side, and then you've got the book section, I guess you could call it, there on the left, and then your pocket at the back. Oh, yes, the trees that are upside down, that's because I'm using double-sided paper. So you are going to have that problem if you use a print that goes a certain way. But I kind of feel like that doesn't matter so much because the recipient of this junk journal is going to layer things on top of that anyway. With the construction of the journal now fully completed, it is time to add a few decorations. I am going to keep things pretty simple though. I'm going to layer up a few embellishments for the front cover here, and I do want to add a ribbon. It may sit nice and flat now, but as the journal fills up, it will open up and it will be really nice to have that ribbon to be able to secure it closed. There is nothing quite like a chunky junk journal. Here's a look at the completed finished journal ready to gift.
Okay, so I guess there is just one burning question that remains to be answered. Did I use up enough of my stash so that my remaining supplies will fit inside this box? It's time to find out.